What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another Retro Yu-Gi-Oh video, back with another Gladiator Format video, the format based around the 2008 US Nationals, with a card pool going up to around Late Destruction. And, it's a ban list that's made 2008. And the combination of those two things has sort of led to a Gladiator Beast sort of like Tier 0 format, at least at the time. With Modern Expiration, there are other decks that are popping up. And so, whether it's Tier 0 or not, there is some debate about that. But it's a fun format either way, whether it's Tier 0 or not, because personally, I like the Gladiator Beast Mirror Match, even if it is, the thing that you'll run into a lot. But, there are other decks like Lightsworn and stuff that are also fun that you can play. You can play a Dad Return deck that's not as oppressive as it is in Dad Return format. So there's a lot of good stuff there if you like this sort of era of the game. Now, I do think that the formats can be a bit explosive and a little bit sacky sometimes, so that is something to keep in mind if you're going into this format. But I do think that formats that are a bit on the sackier side can still be very fun. And so I do think that this format is a pretty fun one overall. But, as I mentioned, Gladiator Beast is sort of the best deck in the room, so people have been trying to figure out other things that you can do against it. Now, I've covered Lightsworn and Dad Return in this format on the channel already. But I wanted to try out another deck that you can potentially play that's sort of a different version of Dad Return, honestly. And I think compared to the regular version of Dad Return, this does have some advantages. It also has some disadvantages, but I'll talk about as well. But it is Jinzo. So basically in Light of Destruction, which is the last legal set in this format, Jinzo Returner and Jinzo Lord came out. Now, Jinzo Lord is pretty bad. It's just not even worth playing and talking about. But Jinzo Returner is actually a very interesting card that can actually lead to some interesting plays. This is basically a level 3 machine, dark, 600 attack, 1400 defense, so it is a Crush Card Virus tribute there. And it can't attack directly, doesn't really come up that often. But when this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target one Jinzo in your graveyard, special summon it, but destroy it during your end phase. So a couple things to note about that. One, it says destroy it during your end phase. So if this thing gets sent to your graveyard during your opponent's turn, you will still have Jinzo around for your turn. So that's a pretty nice feature there. And also, this is just when it's sent to the graveyard. It can be sent to the graveyard from field, deck, hand, etc. So there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do with this deck. And since it is a machine, and Jinzo is a machine, you can actually set up a really interesting Future Fusion play, where if you go Future Fusion and you reveal Chimeritic Overdragon, you send a Cyber Dragon along with 3 returners and 3 Jinzos. The 3 returners will summon back 3 Jinzos if your opponent doesn't have a DD Crow. And then you'll have exactly 3 Darks engraved for a Dark Armed Dragon. Now that's sort of like the pie in the sky, once in a, well, not once in a lifetime, because it does pop up a fair bit, but, once in a couple games sort of scenario that can just win you the game on the spot, because you get out 3 Jinzo, your opponent doesn't have any traps to use against you, and then you can bring out Dark Armed Dragon, start popping what they do have, and then get in for lethal damage. So that's sort of the ideal case, but even if you don't hit that case, there's a lot that this deck does have going for it. You can send the returners through a variety of means. Dark Rougher is the way that we're mainly going to do it. So if you pitch like a Jinzo or a Jinzo returner for the Dark Rougher effect, and then you send another Dark from your graveyard, you can pick either the Jinzo or the Jinzo return, whichever one was not the one you sent, and then get that out on the field to just shut down your opponent's traps and have a big guy out. So that's pretty good. We're also playing triple Necro Gardener as another send off the Dark Rougher, because sometimes you do have to set up the Jinzo return, Jinzo play over the course of a couple turns. So sometimes you put down a Gruffer, you send like a Jinzo or a Necro Gardener from your hand to the graveyard, and then send a Jinzo from deck to grave, because either it's first turn of the game and you don't necessarily want to just bring out Jinzo that will die in your end phase, or it's over the course of 2 turns, so you basically pitch a Necro or another Dark from hand, send the Jinzo, and then next turn you can send the returner and bring back that Jinzo for a bit of a push. And because you've sent Necro Gardener, you can protect the Dark Rougher. So there's a bunch of different sort of things that you can do with this deck in very interesting ways. We're also playing triple DD Crow in addition to the Necro Gardenas. These are sort of like, they're not both hand traps. DD Crow is a hand trap, obviously, but these are sort of just other ways to interact with your opponent around things like Cold Wave or Judgment Dragon, both of which are very big in this format and can be, very annoying for you. So having these other sort of means of interaction that are not on field and not spell and traps can be very good for you. So that's why we are playing the max of these, and they're also all darks. That does fit in with your deck. We're also playing a card trooper here because it's a machine that also mills for you. So if you get lucky and mill some returns while you got a Jinzo engraved, that's pretty good. And also it can be sent off things like Future Fusion. It pairs with limited removal, which we are using to buff up our machines for a potential lethal push. So yeah, it's got a lot of synergies with this deck. We are playing the 2-siders. You don't want to draw one of it, because then your Future Fusion's kind of shut off. So we are playing 2. And, with Future Fusion, we can also potentially reveal a Cyber Twin Dragon, get that going as well. So, yeah, altogether a very, very good card there. Although you definitely don't really want to be drawing this thing, because if you draw it, it could shut off your Future Fusion. But even if you do draw it, it's spell summon, big guy, so it's not the worst thing in the world to draw there either. For the spell lineup, we got double Allure of Darkness to draw deep into our deck. It also can potentially pair with this DDR, Different Dimension Reincarnation. Now, I'm playing this in the deck, honestly, because I saw it in PJ Darkness's version of the Dad Return deck that I faced in the Dad Return video in Gladiator format. And I like this card a lot. I think it makes up for the fact that we've lost Dimension Fusion pretty well. And also in this deck specifically, it can do some very interesting things, like discarding a Returner to then get a Jinzo online and also bring back a banished monster. So I do think this is very good. And it pairs with the Allures. It also pairs with Gold Sark, which we are playing, because I think that it can, lead into a Future Fusion, which is lethal. It can lead into a lot of different things, and also pairs very well with DDR. So I think that's a very, very good card overall. Future Fusion, as I mentioned, BrainCon is just very, very good in this deck, because you contribute whatever you take for a Jinzo potentially, so that's very nice. Heavy Storm and MST to deal with your opponent's back row. Limit removal to, just kill your opponent out of nowhere. Reborn to bring back whatever you might need. Overload Fusion to banish everything for a Chimera tech, because that is another win con for this deck. And the more win cons you can put in a deck, the better, honestly. Premat to bring back one of our monsters as well. Double Rota, this can search out either the Greffers or the Necrogardeners, either of which are pretty good. We've got a Crush Card Virus here, which can be paired with the Returners, the Necrogardeners, the Crows. There's a lot of targets for this thing. You get out of Sangan as well. I personally didn't put it in because deck space is very tight, but Sangan's another very good target for it. Mirror Force here to deal with your opponent's attackers, Torrential Tribute to deal with their summons, and then Trap Death Shoot to deal with their hand. Now, it may seem weird to play traps in a deck that's focused on bringing out the Jinzos, but because of the way your turner works, generally your traps will be online during your opponent's turn, so we are playing them, and because we are playing Jinzo, we do have a lower amount of traps overall, so we're not playing a ton more beyond this, but I do think that these traps are essential to play in any deck in the format, if you can support Crush Card Virus, that is. For the side deck, we got triple Legendary Jiu-Jitsu Master. This can be brought in against Glads, although I do think this deck has a good Glad Beast matchup overall. Third DDR, in case, you're worried that your opponent's going to bring in spell trap removal, or if you're facing a macro deck, this can be very good to bring in, because, you get to bring back whatever they banish off Macrocosmos or Dim Fizz or things like that. Triple Twister to deal with your opponent's back row. This can deal with things like Shadow Imprisoning Mirror, which are very annoying for you, but it can also deal with Macrocosmos and Dim Fizz, so those are very nice as well. We have Dust Tornado as well. The reason why we're playing Twisters over Dust Tornadoes is because generally the things you're worried about are going to be your opponent's, Shadow Imprisoning Mirrors, Macrocosmos, Dim Fizz, things like that. So Twister hits those anyways, and also Dust Tornado can be dead under Jinzo if you just have a resolved Jinzo on field that's not brought out under Returner. So I do think that Twisters are generally better, but we do have this in case we need another piece of spell trap removal. Triple Light Imprisoning Mirror, that's mainly for Light Sworns, but there are some other decks playing light monsters that you might want to hit. Mind Crush to just, deal with decks that search a lot. This can be very good. And then triple Threatening Roar in case we're up against an OTK deck. For the Fusion deck, we got triple Chimeritic Overdragon, triple Cyber End Dragon, triple Cyber Twin Dragon, and then some Geysaruses and some Heraclinoses. These are generally the Fusion monsters that are going to potentially come up in weird edge case scenarios, although they likely won't come up too often, but it is good just to play them to have them. We only have 14 cards here. You could add a 15th, sure. This is the last format with an unlimited Fusion deck, so you can actually add as many Fusion monsters as you want here, but these are the ones that are actually probably going to come up for you. And that's going to do it for the deck breakdown. Let's dive into some games and see how this deck actually plays. Okay, our first game is up against Soul65, a freaking guest on the channel. Always a pleasure to have them on, and we're going to dive in. I accidentally have show both on instead of show hand, but they are playing Glad Beast here, so we wanted to get a match with the meta first, just to show it off. And yes, while people are saying that Glad Beast might not be entirely tier 0 yet, it is still the best deck in the format right now, as far as we can tell. And so, it's like having a GOAT format video and not showing off Chaos Turbo in there. It kind of doesn't present a full picture of what you're expected to see here. But we open a very good hand. We're going to start by setting a Crow and a Crush card here, because this, can just shut off whatever our opponent's potentially trying to do. And so I feel very good about this overall. And they're just going to set 2, go for a Darius. Now, if we had shotgunned the Crush card, we would know what those back row are. But generally, I value, letting them commit to a normal summon before going for the Crush card Virus. And since it is Glad Beast, they could potentially commit even more to this if they want to go for a Tessire into a Bestiari to potentially try and, guaranteed hit the defense if it's not a chainable. But they are indeed just going to attack him with the Darius here. We are going to use Crush card on that and hit the Darius hit the Prisma in their hand, and then we get to see that they have a Reborn and a Test Tiger here. So they did have the Test Tiger. They could have gone for it, but they wisely chose to hold it, which I think is the correct thing to do. And now next turn, they could potentially go like Reborn into Prisma, and then Prisma mill a Bestie. And then, Test Tiger that for Darius to go into Geyserus. So there are a bunch of things that they can potentially do there. So that could be a bit annoying for us. Main 2, they're going to think about this a bit and go for a Reborn on the Prisma. So that tells me that they probably have a defensive trap there, or a defensive spell potentially even. And they're trying to do this just in case we draw into another copy of Crow later on, or we potentially set negation for the Reborn there. But we're going to draw into a Grepher, and that actually is very, very nice for us. Now we can actually set up a lot of interesting things here. So what we're going to do first is we're going to think about this, because it's kind of awkward if we go like normal summon Grepher, pitch Jinzo, then Returner, and then Jinzo comes back, because then we don't have 3 Darks Engraved, and we want to get that 3rd Dark Engraved for the Dark Arm Dragon we have in hand. And preferably, we'd like to get that 3rd Dark Engraved while we have a Jinzo on field to shut off what our opponent's doing. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use the effect of Dark Grepher in hand to special summon itself to the field, just like that. And then we're going to priority use this effect to pitch this Grepher that we have in hand to get 3 Darks Engraved, send Returner, and now Returner can bring back the Jinzo and leave us with 3 Darks Engraved just perfectly for Dad. Now, if we look at our opponent's back row, they did have Mirror Force and Solemn Judgment here, and they actually say after this game that they're debating using Solemn Judgment on the summon of Grepher there, but actually it would not really have helped them that much, because then we'd have 3 Darks Engraved exactly for Dad, so we'd bring out Dad and try and pop more of their field here. It would be a bit riskier for us because we wouldn't have the Jinzo online. If we wanted the Jinzo online, we could normal summon out the Grepher, pitch a Return, or pitch the Dark Arm Dragon from hand to bring out Returner and then bring out Jinzo, but I don't really think that would have been ideal. So I do think it would have just been Dark Arm Dragon, potentially going into that second back row there. And if that back row is something that stops the Dark Arm Dragon, then we just potentially normal summon out Grepher, crash into the Prisma, because we know that all they've got in hand is a Test Tiger, and then we could set TT. We could also hold the Grepher, and just have the TT there for later. But I feel like we still would have been in a winning position, especially knowing, like, with hindsight, that the back row is Mirror Force. We would just be winning this one either way. So we do get to bring out the Jinzo here, bring out a Dad now, and get popping. And they just admit defeat. They are under Crush card, so it's unlikely that they'd be able to draw away out of that. Even if we don't necessarily have lethal on board there, it is definitely very, very close. So, yeah. But that is sort of what the deck can really do when you draw those perfect hands and can actually set up everything. It can really insulate your Dad pushes very well, which I do think is a benefit that it has over the sort of regular Dad return decks. Now, those regular Dad return decks need much insulation because, you bring out one Dad, try and bait out some back row, then maybe you have another Dad to work with as well. But I do like that this can sort of set up checkmate positions for your opponent where even if they have some, disruption or something, there's not really much they can do there. Our opponent's going to open with a Rhoda for a Prisma there. And then they're going to summon out that Prisma, choose to not use its effect to send the Bestie, and then set 3 and pass back to us. I feel like I generally, when I summon out Prisma, I want to use the effect just to get a Bestie in rotation. Because, then it's there, right? Like, if the opponent's TD Crow, they've got TD Crow, but, now it potentially opens up options for a Darius play and stuff like that. So I potentially would have just gone for the Bestie here. But I don't know exactly how many Bestiaries they're playing in their deck. Maybe they're, doing interesting stuff here. Maybe they're trying to insulate against Crow in a different way. So I don't quite know. But either way, I got side right here. So I'm going to go for it, try and bait out some back row there. And it does indeed bait out a bottomless trap hole there. So that side will vanish now. We actually have 2 options here. We could just summon out a Dark Grepher here, pitch the Necro Gardener, and then send a Jinzo to then set up for a later play, going for Dark Grepher, pitching another Dark that we potentially draw into here, and then sending Returner, bringing out Jinzo, and then going crazy with that. We got Braincom, we got DDR, so we get a lot of different things we can do here to extend further. But I think what I'm going to do instead is just go for a Card Trooper, mill 3. Unfortunately, we mill a Returner without a Jinzo engraved, so that is the risk of just blind Card Troopering. But we do have 3 Darks engraved, and we also get a Necrogardener engraved as well, so that's very nice for us here. Now, we could get even more aggressive by going for DDR, pitching the Necrogardener for a Cyber Dragon, but since I've got Grepher in hand, I don't really feel the need to go for that play yet, because, I can save the Necrogardener for pitching it with the Grepher and potentially setting up some other stuff. So we're just going to attack in with that Card Trooper into the Prisma there. and they will indeed take it, so that'll be 200 damage in. Luckily, no dimensional prison. That would be really annoying for us, but then we'd be able to DDR out the card trooper later, so it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for us, but would definitely be annoying. But we're in a very good spot. We've got a Necro Gardener in our grave to potentially stop an attack here. They're going to go for a Reborn on the Prisma, and that's a bit worrying for us. They're going to reveal a Geyserist now, and now they're going to go for that Bestiarian grave. Go for Test Tiger. Test Tiger out at Darius, and then Darius back that Bestiari to then go into that Geyserist. So that is going to be a bit annoying for us here, and they will be able to pop the Trooper, which is actually nice for us because we draw into Dark Arm Dragon, which is very good for us. Then, since they have not used their normal summon, they're going to summon out Laquari, and now things are a bit awkward. If we don't, so here's what makes it awkward. If we don't use Necrogarda on the Geyser's attack, then they could potentially go into 2 Glad Beasts with the Laquari there and then go into Heraclinos, which is kind of annoying for us. As they got back row to protect it, and then, we do have Dad to potentially clear it, but if they use the back row to stop the Dad, then we don't really have a good way to deal with Heraclinos. It's very annoying. Yes, they don't have any cards in hand right now to use its effect, but, we don't have anything right now to deal with it next turn besides the Dad. And so it could potentially cause problems for us if they can stop that and then just, leave us sort of up a creek there. So I am going to use the Necro Gardener on the Geyser's attack. I will take the Laquari attack. I don't really think that matters as much, but I really don't want them getting out 2 Glad Beasts off that Geyser's. So they're just going to pass back to us, choose not to tag out the Laquari, which makes sense because you can't go into another Laquari off this one. So, there's no Darius targets in grave either, so this is fine for us. So we're going to go for a Dark Grepher here, just normal summon. Ask if the summon is okay. If the summon's not okay, and they potentially got, if they got Bottomless, we've got a DDR to sort of bring back the Grepher if we want it. But if they don't have Bottomless, but they have something else that gets the Grepher in grave, that's 3 Darks for us, so then Dad is online. So I feel like this is the best starting play here, and it looks like that will be okay by our opponent. We're going to go for Dark Grepher, pitching the Necro Gardener to then get another Dark in grave. This may seem weird, because now it's 4 Darks in grave, and this actually is a little bit risky, because we're planning on reborning that Jinzo just to shut off their back row, but if they do have a way to stop that, then we are in kind of a tough spot. But I do think this was still the best thing we could do here, because we don't really have a good way to, get that 3rd Dark in grave with the Jinzo online. And, there isn't really much we can do here. We potentially reborn something else beforehand, but then we run into the same issue where, if they stop the reborn, then that is bad for us. So we don't necessarily have the best option here. We also could have potentially, I guess another thing we could have done, we could have just gone DDR, pitch the Necro to bring back, I guess, either another Necro or a Sidra, probably the Sidra here. And then that gets the 3rd Dark Engrave for Dark Armed. But I don't know. It's a bit tricky because then we still don't have the isolation or insulation from the Jinzo to shut off the back row. But there are a couple different lines I could have done here depending on what I wanted to do. I wanted to go for the Grepher now. If they do have the Solemn Judgment for a Reborn, that's bad. But we do have some ways to get around it. They'd be at, let's see, it'd be at 3,900. So actually we could potentially set up a lethal line with BrainCon and DDR there if they do Solemn or Reborn and they don't have another way to stop what we're doing here. So, yeah, I don't know. There are different lines depending on what you want to play around. And luckily, they do not have the Solemn here for the Jinzo. They just had an MST in a book. And so that will not stop Jinzo there. Which makes sense why they'd side out Solemns against Jinzo. Which I don't know if they've sided out the Solemns or not. But, it would make sense if they did. Because Jinzo is just very annoying. Especially if you're drawing into traps while you have a Jinzo on field. That's very rough. So, it would make sense if they potentially sided out some of that. So, but either way, luckily that does go through, and we will Dad with priority to try and pop that Geyserist because Jinzo's shutting off any traps that they have. If they've got Book of Moon here, they could potentially book the Dad. But either way, we've gotten rid of the Geyserist, so now our Jinzo can attack over Laquari, and then Grepher can attack directly. So I feel pretty good about this. We're going to go for Dad, targeting another back row, and that is the book. So now they're going to book down the Dad, getting us to use up a resource there. So now all we've got in grave is a Necro, which we left there because it's the only Dark monster we have in grave that actually does something here. We're going to attack in with Jinzo and with Grepher. We could have gone for DDR to just get even more damage on board, potentially bringing back either the Grepher or the Sidra. But I feel like this is fine enough. And I want to save BrainCon for potentially setting up a lethal push later, because if I get them down low enough, BrainCon is another win button for us. So, Our opponent's just going to bring out a Bestiary here, attack into our dad, and we're going to Necro Gardener to stop that. They're just going to pass back to us. We draw Gold Shark. Unfortunately, I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, like, okay, what monsters do I have in deck that I can banish here to potentially win the game on the spot? But I don't actually think I have that. I was also thinking, like, what dark monsters can I, banish off Gold Shark and then bring back with DDR such that I can get another Dark Engrave so dad can pop the last remaining unknown. But I couldn't really think of a good thing there either, so... I was thinking about this a bit, and ultimately I decided to go for just flipping up Dad, and then attacking him with everything here. I could go Braincon, and I think Braincon, would that be lethal damage on board? If they've got another book, it's not lethal, but I've baited out the book, I guess, so, or actually it would be lethal because then I DDR something back, so, yeah, I probably should have gone Braincon and Bestie here, but I'm just trying to wait it out as much as possible, which I don't necessarily think is the best thing to do, because it does potentially open myself up to them potentially winning on a later turn. I could have also gone DDR here just to get in that last bit of damage as well, which is another thing I could have done. So I could have won the game this turn. Like probably even regardless of what their back row is. But yeah, I don't know. I just play it safe, and I don't think I needed to here, but I don't really see a draw that my opponent can get into that would win them this game. So they're just going to set one, pass back to us. We draw Overload Fusion, which will still not help us here. We're just going to attack it in that set, and that will indeed be the end of the game here. So, yep, that will be it. And yeah, that was a pretty good one overall, I think. I think it really does show how good this deck can be if it's able to, get set up and do all that stuff. So, I like this deck a lot. I think it's a very, very cool variation on Dad Return. But this sort of showed off what the deck can do, even if it doesn't draw its God Hands. Let me show a replay that definitely does show the God Hand. So we got a game here against Anti-Kevin, another frequent guest on the channel. Always a pleasure to have them on. And we're going to go into the game. And I mean, this is a nuts hand here. I accidentally had it on show both again. My opponent's going to summon out a Valley, and we just go... Actually, we make a misplay right away. We shouldn't have summoned out that Sidra because of what we're planning on setting up with the Fufu. Because what we're going to do with Fufu is just send a Sidra and then send 3 Jinzos and 3 Jinzo returners. That will fill up the board to, 4 zones occupied here. And the issue with that is if they've got like a DD Crow to get rid of a returner, then we are in kind of a bad spot because then we can't actually bring out Dad with that. We need to like bring out Greffer and do other graveyard manipulation there. So that's a bit awkward for us. And we really do need to bring out the Dad so that way we can pop the Valley. So, but I'm going to just go for the greedy play here, going for Fufu, sending all those Jinzos and Jinzo returns along with a Sidra, which is in our deck. So now we can use those returners to bring out everything here. And that will indeed all come out. So now we can drop the Dad, and we can, banish with Dad to pop the Valley, and that's just the end of the game. Like, that is sort of what the God Hand is for this deck. And, as you saw there, even if that failed, we did have a Crush Card and a Necro Gardener. So that was, like, I mean, that was just busted. And that is what the deck can do when it really, like, draws well. You're not going to draw that hand, like, every game. You might not even draw it every 5 games. But the hand that you do draw it, I mean, it's just, so addictive to get that off. Opponent's going to start with a Fufu of their own, revealing a Cyber Twin Dragon. And they're going to send double Sidra here. And they're going to set 1 and pass back to us. Set 2, actually, pass back to us. We have a great opener. We've got Crush Card Virus plus Necro. We've also got Rhoda plus Greffer. We got Dusty. We got Trooper. We got a lot of different things here. And I think, we could have potentially done... We could have potentially just set Necro, set Crush Card past or something to deplete their hand a bit more. Oh, we'd probably also set a Dust Shoot as well. But I don't necessarily want to do that right now because we don't have a way to out the Fufu and the Cyber Twin that's coming out in the future. So if I'd like to, or if I can, that is, I'd like to save the Necro Gardener and the Crush Card Virus for when that second Cyber Twin comes down. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to do a bit of a slower play. I'm going to go for Greffer, pitching a Necro Gardener to then send Jinzo to grave. Next turn, if we want to go for a more aggressive push, we can go for Rhoda for Necro Gardener, pitch that with the Greffer, and then send another returner to grave to then bring out the Jinzo and just have it on field to just beat in. But right now what we're going to do is we're just going to attack into that Sangan. We didn't know what the set was, but I figured it wouldn't be too much risk to attack him with the Greffer here. And luckily it was not. So they're going to search a Proto Cyber Dragon, which is a bit worrying for me because it means that they probably have some combo play to bring out another Cyber Dragon fusion. So we're going to go for Dust Shoot here and try and disrupt that a bit. And we see that they've got a Premat, a Proto Cyber Dragon, a Fusion Gate, a Hex Field Fusion, and an Honest here. That's a bit tricky. None of those are hit by Crush Card. And even if we take like one of the Proto Cyber Dragon or the Hex Shield Fusion here, either way with that pre-mat, they can go into a Cyber Twin no matter what. So what I actually want to take is the Honest, because Honest is, quite annoying. It's a hand trap that can be very, very frustrating to deal with, especially like, if we can't clear opponent's monsters and we got to attack into them, that thing can be insanely good. And also with Cyber Twin Dragon specifically, it can lead to some really nasty scenarios because it keeps the attack gain until the end of the turn. So if it attacks in, they Honest, then they have a ton more attack than normal. So I do want to send back that Honest. I think it's the most threatening card in their hand, especially since they can get into Cyber Twin Dragon no matter what here. And now they're going to bring out a Proto Cyber Dragon, go for a Fusion Gate, and now banish the Hex Shield Fusion and that Proto Cyber Dragon, which is a Cyber Dragon on field. And now they can bring out this Cyber Twin here. They're going to attack in to our Greffer and then attack directly for 2,800. So that is a lot of damage. We could potentially Necro some of this, but I am just going to take it because, life points are a resource. I want to save the Necro for something I can't deal with. And Cyber Twin, luckily we can deal with this Crush card and Rhoda in hand. So opponent's going to put a counter on Future Fusion just to, keep in mind that it is still counting down. And we draw into DD Crow, which is great because that deals with a pre-mat here. So I feel very good about this. We're going to Rhoda for Necro Gardener, and then we're going to set Necro, set Crush. This is a very telegraphed play, so if they do have Disruption for it, that is going to be very bad for us. But this is kind of the best play we have at this point because that Cyber Twin Dragon is going to be very annoying for us otherwise. So we're just going to set that, pass back to our opponent. They get the other Cyber Twin with their Fufu. And now they're going to think about this and go for a pre-mat because they potentially get in for a lot more damage here, even if we stop one of their Cyber Twins. And this will be lethal, even if this is like a Dim Priz or something like that, right? But luckily for us, we've got Crush Card, which can deal with that Cider here. So we don't even have to Crow to stop the pre-mat from bringing it back. So we are going to let that attack in and then go for a Crush Card Virus here, tributing that Necro and then killing everything there. And we know the last card in hand is an Honest. So that Honest can be frustrating for us, but with Crush Card Virus online, I feel very good about this. I'm going to go for a Card Trooper, hoping to mill a Returner to bring back that Jinzo. But instead, we mill a Jinzo, a Dark Arm Dragon, and a Braincon. 3 very good cards. Jinzo you want engrave, but the others you don't necessarily want engrave. But either way, I wasn't really going to summon out Greffer, pitch Crow here, because Crow is very good at, sort of stopping whatever else they might have. So I'd rather just go for this instead. I'm going to attack in with the Card Trooper, dealing 19, and then passing back to them. We get to see that card there. It's an MSC. So they're going to set the Honest because it's the other monster in their hand that we know about. And then we're going to go for a Trooper here again. We mill a Returner, so we got lucky on that. Then we can bring out a Jinzo here. I summon out a Greffer, and since I have a second Crow, I can now pitch that Crow to send another Returner, and then bring out another Jinzo here. So now there's going to be a lot of damage here, because that's going to be 24 plus 19 plus 17 total, because we know we can attack over the Honest with one of the Jinzos. So they're going to think about this a bit, and ultimately they're going to let that Honest die. We're going to attack him with Greffer and Card Trooper and Jinzo. And they actually are going to Book of Moon the Greffer here. They're doing this because the Jinzos both go away at the end of the turn. So, they're like, well, at least this has an effect on the board beyond this. Although you could maybe argue that under Crush Card Virus, you're not going to draw a thing to beat over the Greffer. So it could make more sense if you book down one of the Jinzos to save on life points. But either way here, they stop the damage. So they're still alive here. But unfortunately, they just draw a Dim Fizz, which will not help them right now. So they just have Dim Fizz MST, and that is not going to be enough for them to get out of this. So I really like how this deck can really perform well against a lot of the more jank decks in the format. I think it is probably like tier 2, maybe. Like, I think it's definitely better than Rogue. I'd say it's either tier 2 or potentially tier 1, if tier 1 is a thing in this format. I do like it a lot as another way to build the Data Turn deck, and I think it does do some pretty crazy plays. So if you like actually constructing those crazy plays and, sort of putting your opponent in checkmate scenarios, I think this is a very good deck for you. But as a warning, it can potentially brick. So let's dive into a last replay to show off that a little bit. Although don't worry, this replay won't be entirely just us bricking. There will actually be some good gameplay as well. And we draw a great opening hand here. So we're going to go for a Greffer. We're going to pitch that Jinzo right now. And then we're going to send a Necro here just to get that in rotation to potentially protect our Greffer, because we protect our Greffer this turn, potentially send, pitch the Returner, either send another Necro or send another Jinzo for later. and bring back that Jinzo, get in for a ton of damage here. So I'm going to set MST instead of ATT here, which might seem weird, but the reason why I'm doing this is I want the Grepher to stick around here instead of, going the way of the TT, right? So I'll save TT for later. Maybe this will bait out some spell trap removal. If it doesn't, I can snipe a back row that they set on their turn. So I feel pretty good about this overall. My opponent is going to go for a heavy, so it did bait out the spell trap removal, which I am happy about. And then they're going to go for a Rhoda as well, searching out Aaron. So this reveals that they are on Lightsworn here. They're going to go for a Soul Recharge, pitching that Aaron, drawing 2, milling 2, and they don't mill a wolf, luckily. They are going to think about this a bit, go for a Foolish here, sending a wolf there. So that will mill a wolf, but we can DD Crow, stop that from getting in there. So they're going to set 1, pass back to us. We draw a Sidra, which isn't the best. We don't necessarily want to draw this right now, but we can potentially use it later. We're going to go for the Grepher, pitching the returner, and then sending another Necro. Given that we're up against Lightsworn, I want these Necros in graveyard to protect me against a major play with like a Judgment Dragon or something. But because we pitch the returner, we will be able to bring out that Jinzo there. They're going to choose to Beckoning Light now while they actually can. Just in case we've got like spell trap removal on top of the Jinzo. Once the Jinzo comes out, we will be above 4 darks, or above 3 darks engraved, so they don't have to worry about that here, but they do have to worry about, like, if we've got spell trap removal of our own that we're waiting for the Jinzo to come down to use. So they're going to go for the Beckoning Light now. They're going to pitch an Honest, a Cold Wave, and a Judgment Dragon, so they didn't need to have that Judgment Dragon, sitting around there, as well as a Cold Wave, which they couldn't use because of the Solar Recharge, but they're going to add back a Lumina. They're going to add back a Lumina, and they're going to add back an Honest, which makes sense to me. Lumina can get out more Lightsworns from that graveyard if they want to. And the Honest is very annoying as well, because the Honest will be able to shut down a lot of what we potentially do here. We're going to attack in with the Grepher here, and then attack in with the Jinzo, so we'll at least get in damage while we can. And then main 2, we're going to set the TT. Jinzo goes away, so the TT will be online during our opponent's turn, and we feel pretty good about that. Our opponent is going to think about this a bit, and they're going to go for a Lumina here, pitching the Lumina and targeting the Lumina. We're going to let that go through. Now, we could potentially TT the board at this point, but I want to bait out the Honest now, and I feel like they're going to attack in with the Lumina into the Grepher and use up the Honest and then get in for more damage. Then we can go for Cyber Dragon, attack over some of what they got, and then if they use Lumina even more later, then potentially we use TT on that. But I feel like it is okay letting that go through, and we're going to ask if they're going to prio on the Lumina, now that we've used TT on it here. But they're not going to do that, so we're going to be fine with that. They're going to choose not to attack into the Grepher, playing around Mirror Force. I think that is smart. And they will choose to mill 6 here. Or they won't choose to, but they'll just mill 6. So maybe I should have gone for TT just to shut off their Luminas from milling. But then it's awkward because then my Cyber Dragon's dead, so it's a bit weird there. But I think this is fine overall. So we draw into a Crow, which is very nice. We can potentially Crow a Gardna if they want to use that. But either way, we're going to bait out something here. So we can attack in with the Grepher. So we either bait out the Honest or the Necro, either one of which I think is fine for us here. But they are indeed going to use the Honest instead of the Necro. So that is another Honest down. They got one other Honest in graveyard. So that is nice to see. It means we don't have to worry as much about the Honest here. And then we're going to just pass back to our opponent, because if they want to commit further in with a Lumina or something, then we do have TT to blow up the board. So I feel pretty good about this overall. If they don't commit further in with the Lumina, then we can bring out the Sidra next turn and try and attack over Lumina that way. But either way, I think this should be fine. So they're going to go for Lumina, pitch a Garoth here, and they're going to bring back that Garoth. And so we are just going to TT that, blow up the board there. And if they've got one other Lightsworn in hand that they want to bring out, then we can go for Sidra here and attack over it. If they've got JD, that is obviously very bad for us here. But, like, it is what it is, right? If they got JD, they got JD. Either way, we'd be taking about an equivalent of JD's damage here. But, yeah. I mean, do we have a way to deal with JD right now? Not really, but we do have Necros engraved that we can banish and try and get something online, right? We also do have DD Crow. Let's see. They got 4 Lightsworns engraved. So I actually could have gone for Crow here and just gotten rid of a 4th Lightsworn name to play around that. Maybe I should have done that, but I drawn a Crush Card Virus, so I am not upset about holding that Crow. We're just going to pass back to them and see what they do here. They're going to bring out a JD now, and they're going to use the effect, paying 1,000 life points. Now we can chain Crush Card Virus to that, using it on the Crow to hit that JD. They reveal that they've got a DD Crow in hand. So that can potentially snipe out a Jinzo from our grave if we try and do a return to play later. But I feel like it's still pretty good, to know about this. Unfortunately, they draw into a Crush Card Virus here, so they're able to use that on what we bring out with that DD Crow. So at least that's gone now. We draw into a lure, which is pretty neat. So we're going to actually set the limiter and the allure. The reason for this is because I know they've got Crush Card Virus. I want to give them as little information as possible. And they've already used up 2 JD and a Heavy Storm. So I feel like, it's not the worst thing in the world to potentially just set this stuff. It's not the most likely thing that they're going to draw into the way to clear it. Although you could argue that I should just keep a lure in hand, just to have the option there to potentially draw into what I need in case they do go for a JD or a heavy, or they can't do heavy, but I guess just a JD. But we're going to attack in with the Cyber Dragon, and they've got Crush Card Virus for that, so I kind of predicted that this would happen. But now they don't know what we have set. They're going to draw into a Solar Recharge, and that is the last turn on Crush Card for them. We draw into Dust Shoot, which we don't necessarily want to set here because it's very unlikely that they're going to get into 4 cards in hand. They draw a Sangan here, so they're going to summon that out, attack in for 1,000. We will take that. And now they're going to pass back to us. We draw into a Trooper, which does play around the Crush Card Virus here. We're going to bring out that Trooper. Mill 3. Unfortunately, we don't mill a Returner. If we milled Returner, it actually would be the end of the game because we'd be able to bring back that Jinzo and then limit removal to kill our opponent there. But I think this is still very good here overall. Because we can attack in with the Trooper, and now we can actually, and this was actually a bit of a debate for me, we can go for limited removal here just to get them down to 100 life points. So now JD cannot actually use its effect to, wipe out the entire board. We will be drawing a card under Crush Card Virus when the card Trooper dies in the end phase, unfortunately. But I think it is still worth doing this just to get them off of JD, get them off of Premature Burial, get them off of a lot of different life point effects that could be disastrous for us here. So they're going to search out a Raikou, which makes sense. It's both a soul recharge thing, and also it's just a card to potentially destroy something on our field. We draw into a Brain Con off the card Trooper when it dies in the end phase, which is very nice for me, because now they can't ever really commit something into attack mode here, or else we win the game, right? Or not quite, because they've got Necro Garden and Engrave, but we at least threaten a lot here with that Brain Con, so I feel very good about that. They are going to activate Soul Recharge, pitching that Raikou, drawing 2, milling 2. They mill another Necro, which is very unfortunate for us, but they also milled their third Honest, which is very nice for us. So I feel good about that. They are going to go for, what are they going to go for here? The JD. So they did indeed draw into the third one, which makes sense. They don't have too many cards left in their deck. They're going to attack him with their 3K. I'm going to banish a Necro, stop that attack from going through, and then they're going to pass back to me. We draw DDR, which is a bit of an interesting one here. We could bring back the Necro, but it does come back in attack mode, so it's a bit awkward there with the JD on field. We do have one other Necro in Grave, and we know that this Judgment Dragon also mills 4 at the end of each of their turns, so they do have to mill 4 here. They forgot to do it, but we luckily do remember it, because milling is a potential win con for us at this point. If we can get enough Necros in rotation here, we can potentially win the game through that. So this does set up for an interesting play. And it actually sets up for a couple risky plays as well. So, yeah, it's a bit tricky here. I think what I should do, honestly, and I don't do this, and that is a mistake on my part. What I should do is I should activate DDR, pitching the Dust Shoot to bring back the Necro Garden, bring on the Judgment Dragon, and then activate Alert after that. Just blind Alert, try and draw into something that I can get, and then going from there. But instead of doing that, I take the riskier play, which is just setting everything, and then activating Learn Now. And luckily I do draw into a Dark, but if I had done the play in a different way, then, the Dust Shoot's never really going to come up for me. So I could get that out of the picture. And I could also, get the Necro Garden back, then get an Engrave after I use the Judgment Dragon effect to blow the board, which we'll see soon. And, not run the risk of not being able to activate DDR at all if I draw into nothing with a Dark, right? So I do think this was a risk that it was fine taking, because I've got enough Darks left in the deck that it is decent odds that of 2, I'll draw into a Dark. But this was definitely not the optimal play here. Luckily, I get rewarded for my greed, and I actually have a better optimal play that I can do. I have to banish the Returner off the Allure, but now I can search out a Necro with that Rhoda and then pitch that for the DDR. So now I've got 3, Necro Gardens Engrave. That's pretty good for us here. And we're just going to attack in with that Wolf there. They have to use a Necro Guard on this or else they lose the game. I mean, I guess they could have Honest. No, they can't have Honest because all 3 Honest are Engraved. So, yeah, they have to use Necro Garden here. So they are going to use that. Main 2, we're going to go for the DDR, pitching the Necro Garden that we searched out off the Rhoda. Bring it back this Necro Garden here. And now we can pay 1,000 with the Judgment Dragon, get rid of the Wolf, and get that 3rd Necro Garden Engrave. So again, I did, misplay here because I should have just gone for DDR pitching the Dust Shoot instead of taking the risk, but luckily it did work out for us. And, either way, the result is going to be the same here because our opponent's going to mill out 4 with that JD unless they somehow manage to clear the JD. If they manage to clear the JD, then it's not as big of a threat for us anymore. So, but we have 3 Necro Gardens in Grave, so it is going to be tricky there for them to actually crack through before they're dead. So, luckily we did manage to claw our way out of that one, and that was a pretty good game overall. Unfortunately, the hands we get in these next couple of games are going to be a bit rougher. So our opponent's going to go for Soul Recharge to start. We also did side in some Light Imprisoning Mirrors. We sided out things like Heavy Storm and MST that are not really going to be as useful against Lightsworn here. But my opponent's going to bring out a Garoth, set 1, pass back to us. We draw into another Dark Arm Dragon, so our hand is Sidra, Dark Arm, Necro, and Returner, which is not the best hand to see. We can still go for Sidra, just bring that out, trying to hit over the Garoth here. And we actually do think about this because we could potentially, summon out the Necro to get even more aggressive here. We don't necessarily want to set the Necro because they've got Aaron that shuffles that back into the deck. We really want that in Grave. So we ultimately are just going to decide to do it because we're probably going to just summon this thing out in attack mode at the end of the turn anyways. And luckily for us, our opponent does not have a way to stop this here. We're going to attack over that Garoth and then attack directly with the Necro for 600. So we're going to pass back to our opponent, see what they do here. They're going to do a big thing here, then go for a Judgment Dragon because they do indeed have 4 different Lightsworn names in Grave. I mean, it's kind of unfortunate we could have played around it by not attacking into the Garoth there. But I do think, I don't know. I kind of support doing this because we don't want them to get multiple, other Lightsworns on field and then, get drawing off the Garoth, right? Like, that seems pretty bad for us. So we do the plays that we have access to, and I do think this was sort of the best play that we had to do. But our opponent is going to pay 1,000 for that Judgment Dragon, also chaining Beckoning Light there to add back 4 light monsters from their graveyard to their hands. So they're going to add back the Honest, the Garoth, the Lumina, and they're also going to add back the Celestia. So that's going to be a bit tough for us to get through here. You can go for Lumina, pitching the Garoth here, and bring back that Garoth, which they can indeed do in this format. Yeah, so it's going to be a bit unfortunate for us because they potentially draw more with the Garoth there. And they're going to attack in for 1,000. 1850 and then 3,000 here, and we will just take it. We could potentially do Necro on that, but the way I figure it is I could just use Necro on a later Judgment Dragon attack, so either way it won't really matter if I use it now. But you could argue if I draw into a DDR, I want to get the Necro in rotation that way, but it's a bit tricky there. So I'm just gonna let all that go through, and now the Lumina is going to mill here. Oh, another reason why I leave the Necro in Grave is because if I draw into a Grepher, that is one of my ways out of this situation because I can pitch the Returner and then pitch another Necro Gardener or something, then bring out these dads here and actually start managing the crack into their board. So another reason why I leave the Necro Gardener there, which I do think is probably correct. But our opponent's going to mill 3 off the Lumina, including a Raikou, and now that will get the Garoth milling. And so they'll mill into a Lumina, which will draw them a card here. They're going to mill 4. And now they are going to just pass back to us. So we draw a Light Imprisoning Mirror, a bit too late, unfortunately. But yeah, that's not necessarily what we wanted to see here. This is going to be a bit tricky, in all honesty. I think one play we could make if we want to get defensive is we could special summon out Cyber Dragon in defense, then set Returner, pass back to our opponent. And we know they've got an Honest, so it makes it a bit tricky for them to actually deal with this board, especially when we do have a Necro Gardener in Grave. And we do have Light Imprisoning Mirror to shut off a Celestia, which is something that they could do as well. But I don't know. I want to bait out that Honest now rather than later because since I am at such low life, if they ever draw into another light monster, they can just beat over my things and potentially get me down low enough to kill me. So I do actually just want to go for the Hydra into the Lumina. If they use up the Honest, they use up the Honest. And they did use up that Honest. So now we don't have to worry about Honest. But now we're in a very, very difficult spot. So we set the Honest, we set the Light Imprisoning Mirror pass back to our opponent. But we don't really have a good way to win from this position. So yeah, I don't think I should have done this in hindsight. I think honestly I should have just summoned out Sidra in defense, set the Returner, set the Light Imprisoning, pass back to our opponent. If they gone for Celestia to try pop our board a bit, we do have Light Imprisoning to stop that. And then we potentially survive a turn to potentially draw into a way to turn on our dads here. But it would definitely going to be a bit tricky to do no matter how it sort of shook out. Opponent's going to go for Lumina, actually pitching the Celestia there. So they're choosing to get more cards on field here rather than, going for the Celestia, tribute effect. but we do have this Light Imprisonment Mirror to stop the Lumina from being able to bring back the Celestia. Unfortunately, they do have another Honest in hand, so they're able to bring that out, and this actually will be lethal, even if we Necrogardna the Judgment Dragon. If they attack in the correct order, they will indeed have lethal damage. So we Necrogardna the Judgment Dragon, they attack in with Garoth into our set, and then they attack in for 21 here, and that will indeed kill us. So yeah, in the last card in hand was Royal Oppression, which is interesting, but yeah, that wouldn't really help them in a different way. So if we had gone for Sidra instead, and then set the Returner as well, then it's a bit tricky to tell what they would have done. I feel like the play for them in that moment would have been maybe just go Lumina, pitch an Honest, and try and bring back a Jane. We would have chained Light Imprisonment Mirror to that. And then they could potentially summon out Celestia over their Lumina, because Lumina would be a lot less good there. And then attack in over both our things. And then we would actually survive that turn. So it probably would have been best just to be defensive here, but we'd be majorly on the back foot. They would still have an Honest in hand, and it would be not very good for us here overall. Yeah, so as is, we just lose the game here, and that's going to be unfortunate. So we did brick a bit there, but again, I think I probably could have played in a different way to potentially allow myself to unbrick myself on the following turn. But, you know, when you play this version of the deck, you do play a little bit more bricks than normal, so it is something to consider. We go for Alert here, drawing 2. Now we get to banish 1. And we will banish the Jinzo from hand, which may seem weird. But the reason I banished the Jinzo instead of anything else in our hand is because I want to keep the Crow for their graveyard, and I want to keep the Returner for Crush Card Virus. I get Crush Card Virus plus Light Imprisonment Mirror. That seems very, very good against Lightsworn. And so even though Brain Complex Jinzo would be very nice here, I do think this is potentially the best play to do. We also have DDRs in the deck still, so we can potentially pitch a thing to bring back that Jinzo from the banish zone if we draw into DDR. So that's another sort of thing we can do there. But I'm just going to set Returner, set Crush Card, set Light Imprisonment, pass back to my opponent. And they are going to, what are they going to do? They are going to set 2, set a third, and pass back to us. Now, we could potentially just shotgun the Crush Card Virus here, just to, you know, get a peek at that monster, rip apart their hand a bit more. But I don't actually want to do that. And the reason why I don't want to do it, there are a couple of reasons, actually. One, if we hit Lightsworn monsters, Lumina can bring them back. So I don't necessarily want to go in for a Crush Card Virus right now, when they could just bring back whatever they lost. 2, Beckoning Light can just bring back whatever light monsters they want here as well, dodging around Crush Card Virus too. So what I like to do with Crush Card is I like to save it for the last possible moment when we can actually get the most value off this thing and, you know, potentially stop a big play that the Lightsworn deck would want to do. So for that reason, I'm going to hold the Crush Card Virus here. And we draw into a Sidra, which is not really that good for us. But our opponent's actually going to use a Crush Card Virus of their own here. They're going to tribute that Necrogardna, hit a Dad and a Sidra, leaving us with a Crow and a Braincon, and of course the Returner on field, which I think honestly we're just going to flip up and try and get in for damage here, because we do have Crush Card Virus to then tribute it for later, so not the worst thing in the world for us here. But they're going to go for a recharge, pitching a Celestia. This is a reason to potentially shotgun the Crush Card Virus in the Lightsworn matchup, because it does potentially take away their Solar Recharge targets in hand. But like, if you leave them with the Solar Recharge in hand, then after the Crush Card phase, they can potentially just go for Solar Recharge, you know, drawing more into their deck and potentially drawing out of the situation you left them in with the Crush Card. So, you know, I personally like holding the Crush Card. I think it is probably the right thing to do, but unfortunately for us, our opponent does have the Decree here to shut off the Crush Card. So they brought in Decree to stop things like Light Imprisonment Mirror, which, you know, is obviously very good against their deck. But unfortunately here, you know, we get punished for it because the Crush Card Virus is hit by that as well. So that is not going to be good for us here, because we lose a very, very powerful card here. We take 17, and our opponent has a way to shut off our Light Imprisonment Mirror. Luckily, we do have a way to get rid of that Decree, so that is at least something going for us. We can go for Braincon on the Lila there, so we can take control of that, attack in for 17, and then use the effect in main 2 to destroy the Decree there. And then in the end phase, we could potentially mill 3 with the Lila before giving it back. But I actually will choose not to mill. I don't want to potentially get over, you know, 3 Darks Engrave here for if I draw into a Dad later. And I don't necessarily want to go for a Jinzo and Return to play right now when it's just going to die in the end phase anyways. So I'm just going to give it back to my opponent and see what they do. They are going to go for a Card Trooper here, milling 3, and they mill another Necro, which is also very good for them. They're going to attack in for 19, dropping us down to 3,600 and passing back to us. So we're going to activate Light Imprisonment Mirror here in the end phase to shut off the Lila milling effect. So I feel okay about that. It's just better to keep them off of more things. We go into a Jinzo here, which will indeed get sent to grave, and unfortunately we won't really be able to use that. So yeah, it's a bit rough for us here. What we have to do here, honestly, is setting the Crow, because that'll protect us a little bit. But I was kind of hoping my opponent would forget that they can actually switch Lila to attack here and get in for lethal damage, because they have exact lethal here. But even when we set the Crow, if they've got any other monster, they can just summon that out, attack it for the Crow, and then get in for lethal, because they will know it's the Crow, because they know our hand exactly. They're going to mill 3 with that Card Trooper, summon an Honest, so they did have it. They would have won here either way. And then they're going to attack in for lethal damage. So that was a bit of a rough one here. If I had shotgunned the Crush Card Virus, first turn before they could get the Decree online, then potentially we could have potentially done something different, because it would hit the Celestia, and they wouldn't have the recharge target for that. But, I mean, I don't know. Again, like, with Lightsworn, I do feel like saving the Crush Card Virus is generally good, unless you have the read that they're on Decree, and you want to use it before they can get that Decree online. But I didn't necessarily have the read that they were on Decree, because we are playing Jinzo, so, like, Jinzo shuts off traps anyways, so Decree seems like kind of a rough thing to bring in against the Jinzo deck, but if we are playing Light Imprisoning Mirror, it does make sense why they'd bring in Decree. So that was a tricky one, and unfortunately we did brick a bit here in game 2, and honestly, like, 3 a little bit after the Crush Card Virus resolved. But again, we could have potentially changed our fate in game 3 if we'd played a bit differently. But either way, those were some very fun games, and I hope that you enjoyed them as much as I enjoyed them as well. I like this deck a lot. I think it is a potential contender for this format in terms of just ways to build Dad Return in different ways. I think this is a pretty good one. Again, it can brick a bit more than the hero version of the Dad Return deck, but I do think it provides you with a little bit more insulation in different cases and potentially more checkmate scenarios than the typical Dad Return deck does. But let me know what you think about this build down in the comments below. I look forward to discussing with y'all as always. And as always, big shout outs to my patrons, Rinspin, Porkchop, Coon, Bread Knocker, Tyler Crompton, GeoMyFS, Dump Truck, Scout Zero, and Damon Has. It means a lot that you all support this way and encourage me to make more videos like this one in the future. If you want to play games in Gladiator format or any other format that is featured on the channel, head on over to the YGF from Zero Discord server, linked in the description down below. If you want to grow the community more, then definitely like, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and help us potentially get to 2K subscribers. But that's going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed as always, and until next time, I've been Ben from YGF from Zero. I'm signing off. Peace.